That felt good. Woo! Yeah. There's some power in that one. I'm just glad to be here today. Yeah. Thank you. That's nice to hear. It's a little weird when you say that. Nobody responds. Okay. All right. Mm. Oh man. Well, I don't know about you, but this Sermon on the Mount series has really been speaking into my life. Um, I've been listening to my preaching, and I've been coming under conviction. So yesterday I had one of those days. It started out really good. I got up and yeah, really, I did. I got up yesterday and I had a really fantastic quiet time, devotional time with Jesus, and then something happened, and I'm not sure what. But then I kind of lost my focus, and boom. Ever been there? And by the time the end of the day came, I was feeling pretty humble because I didn't feel like I represented Jesus very well yesterday. And that really gets me because I really do believe what I believe, but sometimes I don't act like it. No, that would only be because of Jesus. So this morning I got up and tried it again, like we do, right? And so I was reading, you can imagine what I was reading, My Utmost for His Highest, Oswald Chambers, my good old buddy. And he said this, and this is what I needed to hear today. He said, the basic lesson of the Sermon on the Mount. Let me just explain something to you, too. I wasn't reading in order, I would just random. So this is what came out of my random reading. The Lord has a way of doing things, bringing things around to where He knows when you need something to bring it to you. And so He brought this to me. He says, the basic lesson of the Sermon on the Mount is to stay narrow, right? To narrow all of your interests until your mind, heart, and body are focused on Jesus Christ. And may I add, all of the time. So today is a better day than yesterday so far. I made it to 10 till 10. You know the story of the guy who was laying in bed on a Sunday morning and he says, I don't want to go to church today. And his wife says, well, you got to go to church. He says, no, I don't want to go. I don't want to go to church today. She says, well, honey, you got to go to church today. And he says, give me one good reason why I should go to church today. Well, you're the pastor. I didn't feel like that this morning, though. I wanted to come to church. So today we're going to dive back down into the Sermon on the Mount, and we're going to be looking at Matthew chapter 5 and verse 5, which says this: blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. One of the concepts that we recognize in this study is the logical progression Jesus makes as he presents the Beatitudes to us. These are not just nice thoughts thrown together by Jesus. Hey, that'd sound good. Let's talk about that on this mount. He spoke them in a logical order. For example, each one of them builds off of each other, and one requires the other. And the example would be, in the first two Beatitudes, we have seen that only a man who truly understands his spiritual poverty, blessed are the poor in spirit, only the man who understands his spiritual poverty can possibly do what it says in 5:4, blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who mourn over their sin and the separation it causes between themselves and God. And only the person who understands his spiritual dilemma will be able to rightly discern his spiritual position. That would be to say, he sees himself as he truly is without the Lord. And that understanding brings about a meekness and a humility. All personal arrogance and spiritual pride are washed away in light of this truth. She understands that we are nothing spiritually without the Lord. We are nothing spiritually without the Lord. So this idea of meekness that we read here in Matthew 5:5 is not something that's well accepted by the world, nor by a lot of people who call themselves believers, followers, Christians. Because we live in the kind of world that tells us that we've got to be strong, we've got to be forceful, we've got to take charge. And then Jesus comes along and tells us a different story. Jesus says it will be the meek that inherit the earth, not the strong or the forceful or the arrogant or the proud. And as his disciples, we are to display his attitude, and this to a hostile world. But do we really see the difference we are to make as his disciples? In the Sermon on the Mount series, Martin Lloyd-Jones, who you don't care about, but I really loved, he was a pastor back in World War II days, and he was doing a series of sermons on the Sermon on the Mount in light of what was taking place in the world in which he was living at the time. And so he was talking to them about the responsibility of the meek. And he says this, and I hope that if you don't get anything else out of today, this is what you need to get. But he says, once more then we are reminded at the very beginning that the Christian is altogether different from the world. The Christian is altogether different from the world. It is a difference in quality, an essential difference. He is a man, a new creation. He belongs to an entirely different kingdom. And when I say man, I am including you ladies, okay? You don't escape. I only talked about you today. Did you hear that? He. No, I talk about she too. So just remember that. But this is the language of his day, and that's how they spoke. But anyway, it's a difference in quality, an essential difference, because we are new creation, and we belong to an entirely different kingdom. Hello. We belong to an entirely different kingdom. And not only is the world unlike him, it cannot possibly understand him. He is an enigma, someone hard to understand or explain. He's an enigma to the world. Now here you go. This is a deal I want you to get. Really profoundly hit me this week. And if you and I are not different from the world, in this primary sense, problems and enigmas to the non-Christian around us, then this tells us a great deal about our profession of the Christian faith. That to me is a pretty profound statement. Let me do it again because it's really strong. We're supposed to be an enigma, hard to understand and to explain to the world. And if you and I are not, in this primary sense, problems and enigmas to the non-Christian around us, then this tells us a great deal about our profession of the Christian faith. Boy, that poked me right between the eyes. Once again, we see that if we are following the teachings of Jesus through our lives, we will be different from the world. We can't not be. We will be at odds with our world. As the writer to the Hebrews said in chapter 11:13, and they admitted that they were aliens and strangers on earth. This world is not my home, I'm only passing through. This is not our home as followers of Christ. This is not it. Heaven is our home. We're just a passing through. We're just passing through this ordeal called life. How you doing? How are you doing as you're passing through this ordeal called life? And then in verse 16 it says, instead they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. They were longing. You longing for heaven? So when we come to know Jesus, we become citizens of another world. Our hope is not built on this old world, but a better one. A better one that's coming. Jesus is coming again. And so the lives that we live are to be lives that reflect our otherworldly status. Now some could say, but Pastor, we don't want to be different. We don't want to draw attention to ourselves. So let me ask you a penetrating question. If we don't live lives that are different, meaning Christ-like, how will the world know the difference? So if we live like they do, we act like they do, if we talk like they do, why do they need to change? See, our lives are to be a witness of the change that Jesus has made in us. We need to live in such a way that the world can see it and recognize the difference, so that they might see their need to repent and come to Jesus. Not for us to just be different. What? Yeah. You don't want to be a weirdo just to be a weirdo, okay? As a Christian. But to be different, to lead them, the non-Christian, to the Lord. So there are three things that we need to understand about this meek person that Jesus is talking about here and calls us to be. And that first thing that we need to understand is that the meek are not the weak. A little poetry there. Very little poetry. The meek are not the weak. In our modern English vernacular, the word meek is hardly one of one of the more honorable words of the day, if you will. In fact, this good word carries with it the idea of spinelessness, subservience, weakness. It paints the picture of the 95-pound weakling on the beach, and the muscle-bound guy comes along and kicks sand in his face. A meek dude down there. Today, meek might be better understood as weak. Now, that's really too bad because this is a great word. And as we break it out, we're going to see that. In the original language that the New Testament was written in the Greek, the word for meek means humble, modest, in contrast to quick-tempered, arrogant, or proud. The meek person is one who doesn't think more highly of himself than he should. In fact, he is the person that thinks more about others than he does himself. That's this meek person. The English word that probably comes closest to the Greek word would be the word gentle. And I like to put gentle and man together to form a word picture. Gentleman. In the Bible, we see many examples of gentle men. Abraham was such a great gentleman to fit the definition of meekness. He fit that definition very well. He was called a friend of God. What a compliment to be made. Yeah, Abraham. Oh, yeah, he's a friend of God. If people say that about you, finger goes all across the room here, and it ends up here. You ever notice that if you point your finger at somebody, you got three of them coming right back at you? Yeah, look at it. There it is. TV, it's on TV. Are you streaming? But Abraham was a friend of God. And we see the example of his meekness in several different places, but one especially when he and Lot came to that land that God had promised. He allowed Lot, his nephew, to take the best of the land, and he took the other part, and he did it without complaint. He chose his nephew's desires over his own. That is what we would call meekness. We see it again in Moses, who is actually described as the meekest man that ever lived on the face of the earth. And yet Moses was one of the most amazing leaders in history to do what he did in taking the Israelites out of Egypt, rescuing them, and bringing them to a new place. Moses was an incredibly strong leader, a powerful man, but yet he was known as the meekest man on the face of the earth. And if you really want to take a good look at Jesus, you see what a gentleman is like in every way. Meekness does not mean weakness. It's important for us to get this. So the second thing that we must understand about meekness is that meekness is not a natural quality. It is produced by the Holy Spirit of God in us. We are not born into this world meek. This is not a human quality that we're talking about here. Meekness is not a matter of natural disposition. You know, there are some people who are born easygoing. Man, and we tend to think of them as being meek, but it's not meekness. It's just they're easygoing. Every mother would love to have a child like that, right? Nor does it mean niceness. There are people who are born who are just naturally nice. My wife is a nice person. But that's not what the Lord means when he says, blessed are the meek. That is purely a biological thing, the kind of thing, you know, this biological thing that you get with a dog. One dog is nicer than another, one cat is nicer than another, but that's not meekness. So it does not mean to be naturally nice or easy to get along with. The meekness that we're talking about is a meekness that only comes after we are born again by the Spirit of God, so God places this meekness within us. So the meekness that we're talking about here is a meekness that is compatible with great strength. Listen to the definition. Strength under control. Meekness is strength under control. Jesus displayed this kind of meekness when we see what he did by going through his trial and through the crucifixion. Jesus could have called a halt to the whole thing. He could have called down 10,000 angels. He could have wiped the whole mess out. He had the power to destroy the world, but he chose to die instead for us. Strength under tremendous control. Never once believed that Jesus was a victim. He was the perfect picture of meekness, strength under control. And lastly this morning, number 3, all who call themselves Christians are meant to be meek. Jesus expects for all of his followers to be meek, strength under control. Just he expects for us to be the light of the world and the salt of the earth. As we've said, we are born again. This is a character quality that is produced into us by the Spirit of God. It can't be worked up. It can't be initiated. We can't do anything to produce it on our own. It is a character quality that God gives to us that we need to activate. Somebody once said, it is offered to us and it is possible for us all. What have we to do? We must face this Sermon on the Mount. We must meditate upon this statement about being meek. We must look at the examples of Bible characters. And above all, we must look to the Lord himself. Then we must humble ourselves and confess with shame not only the smallness of our stature, but our utter imperfection. And then this is the line out of this quote that I love so much. Then we must finish with that self, which is the cause of all our troubles. We must finish with that self, which is the cause of all our troubles. So that he who has bought us at such a price may come in and possess us wholly. A quote. Then we must finish with that self, which is the cause of all our troubles, so that he who has bought us at such a price may come in and possess us wholly. I remember hearing a Christian comedian one time saying, yeah, my wife and I were having problems. So we were really having problems, and we were just had this marathon meeting, conversation that we were having and going through and talking about it and everything. And he said that we came to the conclusion. We came to this conclusion. I was the problem. I was the problem. But don't you find that so true in our lives, how we make our own trouble? And it's time to stop listening to that self, which is the cause of all of our troubles, and start looking to the Lord so that we have this meekness that he wants for us to have. Maybe you are the problem, you're unhappy. My wife just doesn't make me happy anymore. Did you know that's not her job? Not your wife's job to make you happy. You make you happy. Don't put it on her. Lord bless her sweet soul. We need to take a deep look sometimes. Who was the problem yesterday in my situation? It was me. Got his focus off of Jesus and got his focus on himself. Whoa, what a miserable life. I can't please me. I can't please me. But Jesus can. Got to get my eyes off of me and get my eyes on He. Focus on Him and stay narrow in our focus. It's just a matter of understanding that the only way I can possibly be the kind of man or woman that is different from the world is to totally surrender my life to the Lordship of Jesus Christ, to be filled with His Holy Spirit where He is in full control. Now, I believe that I have done that. I do. But I think that there are times when I get my eyes off of Jesus. And that's when I get in trouble. Anytime. If you're a believer and you get your eyes off of Jesus, you're going to be in a heap of trouble. Just checking to see if that was a true statement or not. Verified by the congregation that it was. So. So we can talk about being meek and understanding Jesus' teachings, but as followers of Jesus, what are we going to do about it? So there's always got to, if a message is going to be any good, there's got to be application. Okay? So I've already wagged my finger at you enough this morning, so let's talk about application. What can I do about it, man? I'm already feeling like I'm under the pressure here. Preacher, give me some break here and tell me what I can do so I can be this meek person. Okay, so here we go. So I was thinking about this. How do I intend to put this into action? How do I plan to be meek and humble and gentle? How do I demonstrate this before my world? And I've thought, as I said, a lot about that this week. What it means to be a Christian gentleman. Okay, so this is my perspective. You're listening in on my thoughts. So I have to ask myself the question, am I being a Christian gentleman in my life, my everyday, ordinary walking around life, to my wife? Am I being a gentleman to my wife, which she so deserves? There's not a question about whether she deserves it or not. She deserves it. But am I treating her with words and thoughts, and actions like a Christian gentleman should? Does she feel that she's being treated appropriately? You know what? It really doesn't matter if I think she's being treated appropriately. What really matters is she feels like she's being treated appropriately. And how about the other people in my life, like my daughter, and my son-in-law, and my granddaughters? You, my church, family. The people I do business with, how do they feel that I'm treating them? Would all of them say, yeah, that's a true Christian gentleman. He's a humble and a meek man. Strength under control. And here's the deal, if they don't, then I'm probably not. Which means I need to do something about it. So here's a challenge. What would happen this week if you would just take a personal inventory? Watch yourself. See if you're truly displaying meekness and gentleness and humility to your spouse, to your family, to your friends, to all of those precious people in your life. Just take a personal inventory and just check it out this week. How you doing? Because we can be that person. We can be that person. He has given us the ability to be that person, to be that gentleman, to be that gentle woman, to be that gentle friend. I want to finish off this morning with a quote that I read yesterday in my quiet time with Jesus. Again, from Oswald Chambers. And he said this, he says, has my life in this past week been a good reflection on Jesus' reputation? Has my life in this past week, if I call myself a believer and a follower of Jesus, has my life in this past week been a good reflection on Jesus' reputation? How well have I represented Jesus in this past week? Have people seen Jesus in me? And if not, why not? You okay? Are you okay? You hanging in? You're, yeah, you're okay. Okay. No. Sure, Debbie, go ahead. Yep. What trips my trigger? Out of the moment? Me. It can be a lot of things. It can be a situation with another person, and I get defensive. Maybe they say something, and I get defensive, and I fall out of that meekness where it would have been better to just keep my mouth shut and listen to what they said. E. Stanley Jones says, "I make my critics the unpaid watchmen of my soul." Oh no, I never kicked my dog. No, I never kicked my dog. No, she's my sweetie. She's my buddy. That little thing. I look into those brown eyes and I couldn't do anything to hurt her. As Miss Pam well knows, yeah, she thinks I spoiled the dog. I do. Yeah. I do, don't I? I do. Yeah. Any other questions? Hey, I'm just a human. I'm just a man. I'm working on this stuff, and you know, I'm trying to scratch where you're itching too. If I'm just up here shooting off a bunch of hot air, then it's not helping anybody, then I better just lay her down, and not do it anymore. But if it's helpful, so there's lots of stuff, but it usually comes back to me making sure that I'm strength under control, that I'm being meek. And that's not easy for us men to do, right? We don't want to be thought of as in the worldly sense, but to remember that we are not of this world. Yeah. So Dean says, so treat others as you would treat your dog. And that's good wisdom. Very practical, down to earth, good wisdom. Yeah. And I love the dogs of Cowboy Church too, by the way. You guys have some nice dogs. cats and little sure. No, I'd like to have Eric and Becky Green's little gray cat, though. She is darling. She is a cute cat. So any questions that you have further, I'm going to let Gary Eichley handle. As he comes up to make our announcements this morning. So what do you think, brother?
Hurrah. Nice message. You do a wonderful job.
Thank you.
100% of the time.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today at Cowboy Church Online. Hope that you'll share that with others so that they can tune in and listen as well. Just wanted to mention how grateful we are for faithfulness in giving for the ongoing ministries at Cowboy Church. There are two ways that you can give. One is online, or you can simply mail in your contribution to Walla Walla Valley Cowboy Church. We thank you for your faithfulness in giving. So I'll say for now, happy trails, God bless, stay narrow, till we meet again.